Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Depends on where you're joining us from. It's great to see you all here today. Let's just give 30 seconds for everyone to log in. We would love to see where you're joining us from. If you can type your location in the comments. Okay, welcome everyone to today's LinkedIn live session. Can't imagine we're already in February now, so perhaps a bit late to wish everyone a Happy New Year. But I guess it is a great time to talk about what enterprises in APAC, are looking at, and what are the key trends and some of the must-know shifts defining the IT BPS future in the market. In fact, most of the insights that we will be sharing today comes from our flagship survey on the key enterprise priorities for 2025 that we concluded towards the end of last year. Today, we will cover some of the key trends shaping the market, sourcing strategies, demand themes. We'll talk about new technologies, GCCs, a host of other topics. So we'll keep it conversational as always, and we would love to hear your comments, questions as we go along. And so please type them in the comments box, and we will try to address them during the discussion or towards the end during the Q&A. As a quick introduction, I am Ashish Sehdev, Vice President with Everest Group, and I lead our business in the Asia-Pac region. I'm joined today by my colleague Rishi Raj, VP with the firm, and he led the key priorities survey for 2025. Welcome, Rishi.
Thanks, Ashish. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so let's dive in, Rishi. Sounds like it's gonna be a great conversation. So let's start with the overall enterprise sentiment about the business in APAC. And as the survey clearly shows, very interestingly, that APAC enterprises are more optimistic about the growth than its global peers in 2025. As much as 38% of the respondents said we are highly optimistic against 28% of global peers. And again, more than 52% of the participants said they are somewhat optimistic against 47% in global peers. So clearly we can see more optimism in APAC. So that's great news. And this is also further aligned with what the GDP growth forecasts talk about. So if you look at the World Bank forecast as well as the IMS forecast, there's somewhere around 4.4% for APAC as against ranging between 2.7 to 3.3% for global GDP growth. So that's something which is good news for those here in APAC, and also providers who are servicing the Asia Pac market. So Hirschi, what does that mean for the IT business process services demand coming from APAC? What do you see?
So I think globally, we see there is a positivity. Even if I compare the global sentiment, it's much better than what we had last year, and that's also reflected in GDP forecast, etc. Specifically, when we come to APAC, given the positive business sentiment, we see a lot more optimism in in budget growth for ITBP services industry.
Right. So if I speak to APAC, most of the if I speak on APAC, most of the countries like getting demand geographies like Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, we are seeing an uptick there, uptick in terms of the demand for ITVP services. And Shukba, if we move to the next slide, right? So what we did is we also looked at how are enterprises viewing the growth in their budgets for ITBP services, right? And what we see is if we compare with regards to the APAC, most of the respondents believe that the growth in ITBP services budget will be higher for APAC as compared to global. So if you see on this slide, on the bars on the gray bars represents APAC. So there is a higher share of respondents who expect to increase their budgets for ITBP services, be it in-house, be it through outsourcing. And as a result, at an aggregate level, the sentiment is much more positive in APEC compared to global, right? And we see that this is happening across both segments of the market, be it outsourcing, where internally we foresee the APAC market to grow at close to 8% growth rate, and compare this with 6 to 7% growth rate that we have seen last year. Similarly, the global market is also expected to grow at a 5% rate. When it comes to GCCs, now they are growing at a very tremendous pace, Ashish, as you would see, right? You would have seen how new center setups are coming up every day, and APAC is the hotspot for some of these center setups. More than 50% of new center setups are in APAC, right? And that's also going to be a big demand driver.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Rishi. I think GCCs is definitely a hot theme. We are seeing that trend over the last several years, in fact, and it's only picked up and accelerated over the past couple of years. Not just the setups in India, but also some of the APAC enterprises, especially from the ANZ region and Japan. You see a lot of those GCCs being set up in other offshore locations as well, whether it's India or Vietnam, Philippines, and so on and so forth. So definitely that's a big trend. We are witnessing a lot of inquiries from providers on supporting GCCs. Is that a trend that you see from the enterprise side as well? What do you see from the demand perspective?
Yes, that's an interesting observation, Ashish. So, uh, what GCCs, they have been there for decades now, and they have been witnessing growth. What's interesting is the way enterprises are now looking at GCC versus providers. So previously, most of them viewed them as two different ways of the sourcing model. Now we are seeing that there is a greater desire to partner with providers even on the GCC journey, and that's where the what you mentioned around providers being interested in GCC as a budget center or as an opportunity for them. And we are seeing that sentiment from our enterprise discussions as well. So as we speak, there are multiple areas where enterprises are partnering with providers on their GCC journey, be it GCC center setup, and you would have heard about all the new models which have been coming up, the BOT model, the joint ventures or assisted captives, where enterprises are increasingly partnering with providers to set up their GCCs, right? Then a large share of the support is in the operations phase for those support GCCs which are already in place, helping them in their continuous operation, supporting them with talent, and then also GCC transformation. That's another big area which we are seeing. And then, last but not the least, we have also seen instances where enterprise is redefining its sourcing strategy, and there are instances of a carve out or specific section of a GCC or divestiture. As part of the survey, we have also reached out, we have also perceived views from a lot of enterprises on how do they see the engagement with providers across each of these. And the view, as you see on by the arrows on this slide, GCC setups transformation, both of them are expected to grow exponentially. So the share of support which is required or partnership with providers for GCC setups and transformation is going exponentially. Is setup is really hot, where we see interest from a lot of providers, Ashish, not just the traditional SIs, but even big fours, even specialist providers, as you have seen, number of GCC specialist providers which are coming up, right? So that's a very hot area. And the other one is transformation, seeking support for technological innovation, COE setup, AI implementation. That's an area where there is an increasing partnership with providers.
Yeah, yeah, and over the years we've also seen that the ease of setup has also kind of increased, right? I mean, back in the day when there was a lot to figure out, and today you have almost like a plug and play model where things can get really accelerated, and the time to value capture is kind of really reducing, and so that's great. Thanks, Rishi. That's a good point. Let's talk about IT spends. I think everyone wants to understand where is the investment going from a APAC enterprises perspective. There are a number of technology areas, number of sourcing areas. So, what is witnessing highest growth? What does the survey say?
Sure. So, Ashish, I did talk about some of the key geographies like Japan that has been witnessing a lot of growth. You would have seen investments from a lot of tech majors in Japan, be it Google, AWS, Microsoft, right? We have seen investments from Oracle in Malaysia. Similarly, we are saying while ANG was slightly lagging last year, we see the growth to rebound in Australia, New Zealand as well. Also, we are seeing a lot of growth in India as well, driven by the government push on digital, right? So there's a lot of modernization initiatives by the government, by the PSUs. So overall, we see a lot of tech investments in Asia Pacific, which will likely to drive the demand. Now, specifically talking about what are the key areas of that we witness stronger
Hmm.
growth. So generative AI, that's something which everyone is talking about, and no surprise, that's at the highest, topmost spend, not just within
Yep.
APAC, but globally also. That's an area where enterprises believe they will be spending the most, or at least growing the budget growth will be highest, followed by it's a cyber security, cloud. Those are two other key priority areas. Ashish, if you also see, APAC has traditionally been slightly slower in terms of digital adoption as compared to global. So that's going to give a good. And now, as they gear up, there will be a big push for this cloud, cyber security, etc. Analytics, IT automation will be other some of the other key areas, right? Even when we talk about generative AI, a lot of investment is going to be on the data side of it, because in order to fully implement Gen AI, you have to have your data in place, right? Your the data architecture in place. So that's where we will see a lot of investments, and then yeah, so that's a brief on where we see investments. Also, the specifically in Gen AI, we will see a lot of investment in tech, data, and the third element will be the talent. So there's a lot of upskilling push that GCCs, enterprises, and providers are having for talent on Gen AI.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, of course, Gen AI became almost like a board agenda. AI and broader Gen AI, I would say, over the last year or so, and I think that that has led to increased demand on the data side as well. So a lot of the plumbing, a lot of the data engineering jobs, a lot of tech adoption, modernization, which is required for getting your data ready for AI. I think so that those investments will definitely continue to accelerate totally. I think one of the big things that we are hearing and seeing is this whole idea of agentic AI, which is very real, and we're already seeing a lot of agents coming up for different kinds of use cases across the board, across processes, functions, within industries. We've seen some of the big tech players talking about the fact that they won't hire any developers, and most of that work will be done by agents. So I think that's something which is to kind of watch for. We're still in the early stages. The adoption is in APAC is fairly sporadic. We are seeing single agent use cases, a lot of experimentation, pilot. Of course, the adoption of agentic will happen through the existing tech stacks in the org. But this is the future, and as we get a lot of different agents and the tech stack supports, this complex web or network of agents in the organization will need to be managed and governed and orchestrated. And we do see more platforms coming in that would do that orchestration, management, and governance layer. So a space to keenly watch out for is agentic AI within the broader generative AI space. The other thing, Rishi, that recently came up, and this was obviously not covered in the survey because survey was done in December, but a few weeks back we heard about DeepSeek coming from China. And that really shook the world, right? So and of course we published our own perspective, and so those who want to have a quick view on Everest Group's take on DeepSeek, we have a whole blog around it. But then I think there is hype. We don't know what exactly the reality is, whether the $6 million investment is what it is, or that was required to train may still be questionable. But even if it's 60 or 100 million, it's still way more lower than of the billion-dollar investments done by some of the firms like OpenAI and others. And therefore, it has made the world ask the question, right? That can these models be trained at a much lower cost? Can you use some of the older GPUs or chips to train these models? Do we need to go with the most cutting edge chips? So I think there's a lot of that question, and I think that has really enabled a lot of companies and countries to think through whether can they build their own models. So Europe is now talking about it. India is talking about it. We've seen the government announcing funding towards some of those initiatives. So it's very interesting. But what is clear is that there will be AI democratization, and there will be, as the cost of these models reduce, there will be way more higher adoption. So that's good news for the enterprises and the users. Rishi, how are enterprises thinking about their provider portfolio mix? And I think that's something that will be also of interest to the provider community.
Yes, definitely. So see, as we talk about the service provider portfolio, so the sentiment that we receive is there is definitely going to be changes in the provider portfolio mix. Now, these are changes at two levels. One, there are enterprises who are looking to rebalance the provider mix or rebalance the work within their existing providers. And this is a phenomenon we are seeing more commonly for IT business process services, right? And mostly consistent for APAC versus global. Then there are a set of enterprises, especially when it comes to engineering services and CXM. A number of enterprises believe that they are going to change their provider mix, include newer providers in their mix, right? Now, couple of reasons driving this. So for the past 2 to 3 years, what we have seen is the satisfaction level from providers has remained in the mediocre range, close to 4.5 on a scale of 7. So that has been trending, and we have seen a limited uptick in that. And enterprises are now really getting more demanding in terms of the efficiency improvement they are getting from their providers, and providers not just acting as provide a reliable provider for services, but helping them in their transformation journey. That's one area where we see a lot of dissatisfaction among some enterprises, right? The other big push is around cost takeout, cost reduction, and we'll talk more about it. But that's an expectation which is driving change in the provider mix for a lot of enterprises. And Ashish, when we talk about provider mix, what's also interesting is how is the nature of deals changing. So if you take a look in the recent year, what has happened and what we also expect to continue in 2025 is more of short to medium term deals, high velocity deals. So in the range of 1 to 5 years, a couple of years back, long term deals the were more prominent, more than 5 years, more than 7 years. But that's something which we are changing. It is also driven by the desire for high velocity outcomes at enterprises, the continuously changing tech landscape, which is and the continuously changing demands from enterprises, which is getting them to sign up for shorter duration deals and not commit for longer term, right? So those are two interesting things which we see when it comes to how enterprises will engage with providers.
Yeah, and that's very interesting, and so I think, of course, the incumbents need to make sure that there is enough value creation, and and they're keeping up in with the demands of their clients, but also a message for the challengers, right? And so there is a lot of upside in going with some of those propositions, and so how do you really articulate your propositions to take advantage and capture the opportunity that exists in the APAC market. So Rishi, what about billing rates? I think pricing is again something that one is concerned about, because at the end of the day we do see cost pressures, as well as margin pressures on the providers. So how do you think about the bill rates, specifically more in the context of APAC?
As I also mentioned previously, cost takeout is one of the big priority for enterprise, right? And naturally, what that means is uh, there is a greater tendency to not increase the budgets or keep it consistent, right? If I look at 2024, the for most providers, the cost has gone up by 2 to 3% across services. But if I talk about the big rates, it has mostly remained stable or declined in some cases. You see the second and the third column here. So on an average, the cost has gone up by 2.5 to 3.5% across IT ADM, infrastructure, voice, non-voice BPS. That's not reflected in the pricing or the big rates. That has gone down in the past 9 months, if we see. And that's an inherent expectation with enterprises are now having. And given the high competition and the expectation that buyers have, providers are now having to bear that. So naturally, this is also having a big impact on their margins. As we move forward, as we think about 2025, again, we see that the trend is likely to continue, right? So the next two columns on the slide, on the previous slide, right, you see that the expected cost is going to increase. Again, there is inflation, there is increase in people cost, there is increase in other costs that goes into the operations. So across most functions, the cost is going to increase. But then the given the market competition uh, and the purchasing power that enterprises now have, the prices are going to either remain flat or in fact decrease in some cases, especially for when it comes to the business process services, right? So now this the two forces which are playing here, increase in cost and the decrease in big rates or relatively flatter big rates, will have a significant impact on the margins for providers. So that's something that they should be really thinking about. How do they conserve the margins? What are the alternate ways beyond increase in budgets they should be thinking about, right? Be it on the talent side, on the people cost, be it on the real estate, or be it on the other cost dimensions. What are some of the innovative ways they can adopt to ensure that they retain the margins?
Very interesting. Yeah. So that makes sense, Rishi. One of the things that we were talking about is, from a demand perspective, is the investments by the big tech in APAC. I think something that a couple of days we were chatting about. And we do see a lot of investments going in from, let's say, the likes of Microsoft or AWS, Oracle, even some of the other, data infrastructure providers like Snowflake, Databricks, and others, right? And so in the APAC market, so what do you see, and how does that really impact or further push the demand side? Do you see that impacting?
Definitely, Ashish. So you have seen most of the big techs, Microsoft, Oracle, Google, they are investing in Japan in terms of building a cloud infrastructure. Oracle recently announced a big investment in Malaysia for public cloud, right? Now, as these investments happen, there will be downstream demand for ITBP services. So all these investments will give a big push to the ITBP demand from the region, right? And we see there's a lot of opportunity for overall technology modernization, technology investment, which has been slightly lower in APAC as compared to Europe or North America. So this is an area which is likely to witness higher investments, and as a result, higher demand for downstream services, right? And there is also big public spend which is happening, be it, let's say, India. You see a lot of government spend on sweat technology, right? I talked about Australia, New Zealand, which was slightly lagging, but now we see due to rising inflation and interest rates, etc. But we expect that again to go up this year. So overall, we expect that there will be a lot of demand, a lot of investments leading to subsequent demand as well.
Right. No, I think the public sector is an interesting one, because I think that the transformation journey has been on for a while, but I think given the acceleration due to AI, I think a lot of countries, governments, and the public sector at large is thinking about how do we adopt AI and leapfrog, right, the transformation journey. And in fact, one of the clients that we were working with in the APAC region really stated this, that they want to be the most mature player when it comes to AI adoption within their specific industry. And we see a lot of these enterprises really asking the question that what is it that would take them to a more mature adoption, and how can they really leapfrog using AI again, and getting the right infrastructure and right technology investments to create the strong bedrock and foundation for AI. So that's something which is evident. And so there are, of course, then providers who are more focusing on public sector than the others. Probably there is an opportunity out there. Um, Anything else, Rishi, that the survey talked about? Some things that you may want to call out beyond what we just mentioned or discussed? Your voice seems to be somehow coming
Ashish,
through. Yeah.
yeah. So what we talked about, a lot of themes in the survey. I think some of the key ones is increase a very high optimism, a very high push towards ITBP spend, growth in GCCs, both enterprises and providers being aligned on GCC growth, supporting GCC agenda. So those will be the couple of key themes that I believe will be most interesting to watch out for in
Yeah,
2025.
on the GCC one, what is, and so we see this partnership with the providers, of course, right? And there is also a few years back there was also a big move towards more of insourcing, right? And rather than outsourcing. So in a way, that kind of competed with the providers in that sense, right? But at the same time, there is also now this whole partnership opportunity with the providers, right? So firstly, what do you see is the enterprise thought process on insourcing versus outsourcing, and then we'll come to what is it about the GCC model that makes it very attractive?
Okay. So, uh, as we speak with a lot of buyers, enterprises, the sentiment that we get is there is a desire to grow across both the models, outsourcing as well as insourcing. Now, why the specific focus on insourcing or GCCs is the barriers to entry have gone down. There is a well established ecosystem, there is talent availability, leadership talent to set up, run the GCCs, right? GC, there has been, it's a proven model where a lot of companies see the success of their predecessors. In fact, more than 50% of the GCCs, those were set up in the past 2 years, Ashish, those were like first time adopters. So companies which did not had a GCC before are now setting up GCCs. This will be small, mid-sized companies who are now looking up to some of their bigger players who have scaled
Mm.
GCCs. That's one thing, right? Also, the typical economies of scale has gone down. It's much easier to run a small scale GCC as well. So it's a couple of years back, typically GCCs would be bare minimum 500 FTs or 1,000 or upward of
Mm.
that. Now, if you see, there are companies setting up GCCs at 100 FTs also, focusing on
Yeah.
very special services. Someone focusing purely on cyber security or data and analytics. So that's to tap into the talent pool, the skills as well, right? And also to test the waters. What's also driving a large part of this, what's also driving is a desire to retain control. So when you bring things in-house, keep it within the GCC. At the same time, there is a support system either to support the operations or for the setup, etc. So that's making it much easier, right? So that's what is
Okay.
driving the push for the GCCs. And if you see, on an average, we have seen 300 center setups in the past 2 years, and then more than 50% of this were in Asia Pacific. To be more specific, India had more than 100 setups on an average in the past
And
2 years.
And one of the things, Rishi, that one of our other research talked about was, and not talking from this research, but another, is that, back in the day, we saw a lot of GCCs which were coming because of purely cost reasons, right? And they were starting from what you call a stage one or a maturity level one of the curve, right? If you talk about, costs and operations, and then, a revenue impact or a business impact. And what we saw very interesting is that you don't have to be a large center to really talk about creating a business impact from a revenue or innovation
Mhm.
standpoint. So a lot of these new centers being created are not just there for optimizing costs, but they're actually doing high-end complex work. They have global and functional product leaders who are based out of some of these centers, and they're really set up with the thinking of creating of becoming a COE or a competency center for the firm globally, to create a business impact and not just cost. So you don't have to start from really a kind of just throwing some work at a low cost location, but really taking advantage of the talent availability in some of these locations that they have to offer, right? And then it's not just true for India. I think it's true for some of the other emerging locations in APAC as well, right? So it's beyond
Yeah.
India.
Yeah, there's a big mindset shift that I see when it comes to GCCs, right? It's no longer reliable provider of services, a distant entity from the corporate, right? It's now the same entity, an extended arm of the corporate, of the parent headquarters, right? So it's no longer a distant offshore service delivery center traditional service. We see a lot of global ownership being driven from the GCCs, a lot of innovation coming out of GCCs moving up to the high end work. And as you mentioned, the from a maturity perspective, like typically a couple of years back, it used to be a staged maturity. So starting from a low cost provider and then gradually moving up. Now we see GCCs which are directly setting up and they are at stage 3. They are already supporting on the enterprise innovation. They are already being having a seat at the table for the at the enterprise. So that's the mindset shift I'm talking about.
Right,
Right.
right.
So,
And
so
then
that's
one of the
the
things, yeah. Now
sorry,
go,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry, Rishi.
Yeah, so that's the shift in GCCs. And then the other interesting theme is as this happens, GCCs are or GCCs no longer view themselves or provider also no longer view GCCs as a competitor. Rather, both of them now see each other as partners. GCC leaders are now seeing how they can leverage providers to help them grow and augment their capabilities.
Right, right. No, exactly. And I think another trend that we did kind of observe in the research was something to do with and you talked about it in the vendor portfolio mix section. Very interestingly, for some of the large strategic deals, we do see enterprises thinking about vendor consolidation, because again, as they think about modernizing some of their large tech stacks, they want a single large vendor to kind of own a lot of different pieces and able to truly transform. So there is definitely one of that things that we will see more common as some of the strategic partners. In fact, a few years back, we did come up with a model which characterized different kind of service providers. So there would be a strategic orchestrators, and there would be some of the challengers, attackers, some of the transactional players, and there is a space for everyone out there. And as the enterprises are really thinking through their ecosystem strategy, there are different kinds of players for different types of work, and I think that intentional strategy towards thinking through the partnership and ecosystems, right? And the models, whether third party or in-house GCC, or whether working with startups or consolidating with a large vendor. I think that is something that we see as more intentional. We also see that coming up in contract renewals, where increasingly enterprises are activating some of the benchmarking clauses, because some of these contracts that were signed 3 years, 5 years back, a lot has changed over the last few years, and so therefore the agenda, the enterprise agenda, has evolved, and some of these renewals need to kind of reflect that, and enterprises are being very intentional and proactively thinking through what that renewal or that next level of contracting will look like. So I think that's something that we do see. Okay, so before we wrap up the conversation, just wanted to also announce that we do have something for our participants. If you see on the comment section, you will see a link to a form that will get you access to one of our complimentary reports that we curated for your specific department. And this is based on our key priorities research. So we are looking at customer service or customer experience management teams, or engineering and IT, and sourcing and vendor management. So based on what teams within the enterprise you represent, you should be able to have a customized, curated report or a perspective for your department or team. With that, let me come to the recap of the entire session today. If you can bring up the last slide. So here are the trends we really talked about. As you mentioned, Rishi, the services market, especially in APAC, is optimistic. Budgets are set to rise. We do see a lot of enterprises thinking about GCC setups here in APAC, leveraging the talent availability as well as skills and the management and governance experience that we have in the region. So that's a big opportunity from a provider standpoint as well. Investments, Gen AI is leading the investment category, and then there are many others as well. So cybersecurity, we talked about data, analytics and cloud as well. But Gen AI seems to be the big topic where a lot of efforts are going in. A lot of that investment will show in on the data side though. But then that's at least from a mindshare standpoint that is we can clearly see that on top of mind. And of course, enterprise will rebalance their provider portfolio based on what their perspectives are in the short term, medium term. There will be some kind of change, very open to change, very open to consolidation, very intentional about thinking through what the next evolution of that relationship would look like. And then, of course, with the rise in operating costs, there is also impact on the bill rates. So that's something that we talked about. So great conversation, Rishi. Any closing remarks from your side for our viewers?
No, I think interesting time for the agriculture industry and specifically for EPAC, for stakeholders in EPAC, lots of optimism, lots of growth. At the same time, for providers, there is a high degree of competition. So it's going to be interesting 2025.
Yep, absolutely, Rishi. Thank you so much for your time today, and big thank you to all our participants. We would love to keep this conversation alive. If you do have more questions, things that you would like to talk to us about, do feel free to write in the comment section. We'll be happy to reach out to you individually. With that, we'll wrap up today's session. Wish you a good rest of the day. And we'll see you again sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.